All right, and welcome back to another episode of the Fearcast. This is the podcast dedicated to OCD and anxiety spectrum disorders and getting your life back. I'm your host, Kevin Foss, and I'm a licensed therapist specializing in OCD and anxiety stuff. And thank you all so much for joining me for this episode. This is a question and answer based podcast. If you have questions about OCD and anxiety stuff, how to help a friend, how to help yourself, why your therapist is just so weird. They're so weird. Why are they like that? Well, send it in. You can go over to fearcastpodcast.com and you can ask your question there. You can send me a question over at Instagram. I am Fearcast Podcast over there. Of course, you can send in audio questions, and that is going to be probably the best and fastest way to get your question answered, which is what is happening today with Broken Records question. So they sent me a question over at the website, fearcastpodcast.com, and they clicked on the speak pipe button, and they recorded their question there. They also sent me a follow-up email with a little bit of clarification. So I'm going to play their question, and I will read their follow-up just to give a little bit more context to what's going on. But you can send a question in over there. That might be the easiest way. You can also do it over at Instagram. Send me a DM and record your question that way. This has been a whirlwind of a week. So I know I skipped last week, and I'm going to skip next week as well, and I'll explain why. But I skipped last week because I went to the conference, and I typically would record on a Thursday, and all of last week was just bonkers filled with stuff, trying to get ready for the conference and packing and fitting clients in and all that stuff. So I didn't have time to record. But here we are doing this one. So for those of you who went to the conference in Seattle, I hope you learned something from it. I hope you took away something from it. I hope you connected with people who support you, who encourage you, who see you in ways that perhaps you feel like the world doesn't. And I think that's what this conference in particular does really well. It creates this entire environment and this entire community in a way that I think is wonderful. Kind of mixing in individuals, family members, loved ones, and clinicians, all in one place, all in the same rooms, all doing the same stuff, which is learning more about the disorder and learning more about how to help, support, and encourage folks who are struggling with it to, again, get their life back. That's why we're here, right? So, but man, it's like this tornado. I don't know if you've experienced something like this, and everyone I've talked to who's gone through it, and some of my associates who, the folks on staff over at my practice, ROCD, they went and they're just like, I'm exhausted. And I'm like, yeah, man, that's how it works. It's so tiring. You're in seminars all day, learning stuff. Afterwards and in between, you're talking to people. Maybe even you're getting outside and trying to see Seattle a little bit. But and a lot of times it's staying up late and talking with people and learning about their life and what they're up to and how they're helping people and their ideas on certain things. But I'm exhausted. I don't know about y'all. So I barely slept, and I'm hoping to sleep this week. We'll see. But I'm not going to record next week because it is my wedding anniversary, or it was. So the missus and I are going on a cruise, and I'm going to go ahead and celebrate my anniversary. It's 15 years. Can you imagine? Someone's been with me for 15 years. I don't know how. And the joke, and I don't know if it's true or not, it's because she has low standards, and that works really well for me. It's working out great. So I'm going to ride that wave until I can't. So anyhow, but inevitably, or almost always, the conferences are right on my anniversary. So I do not get to celebrate in real life and in real person. So I'm doing that afterwards. So that's why there will be no episode next week. But there's this one today. So Broken Records sent me a question and sent me an audio question. So I'm going to play it, and then I'm going to read her follow-up question or her follow-up information. So we're going to be talking a little bit about ROCD today, and I'll explain a little bit. There's going to be an element in it, a very prominent element, that is going to feel like a twist, and I'm not going to treat it as a twist. I'm going to treat it as just another variation on the theme. So you'll hear a little bit about that, but you know what? Regardless of my further yammering, let's not yammer. Let's get on to Broken Records question.
Hi there. I am looking for help with a question about ROCD, and I also have SO-OCD and maybe some mental health um, OCD. I'm not sure about that. The main issue is that I have right now really intense partner focused obsessions that get triggered as soon as I see my partner, and have dissatisfaction, true dissatisfaction around her kind of my aesthetic preference about her body. She's a curvy woman, and I find that I prefer the aesthetic look of kind of thin, lean men. I'm bisexual, and we have a wonderful intimate relationship, a lot of affection, great sex. But just when I look at her, I get very fixated on her body not being the way that I prefer it to be. Um, can you please help with how to kind of discern just preferences around my partner's body versus ROCD, and also just how to deal with this in a way that, isn't hurtful to my partner? I've had some confessions about it, and it's obviously incredibly sensitive and hurtful. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Broken Record, for that question. Now, let me read the email that they sent in. So, this is the email they sent. So I'll just read through it. It said, "So I'm a bisexual woman with OCD. With OCD, the OCD has made it exceptionally difficult for me to accept both an OCD diagnosis and the label of bisexuality. I've dated men and women. I'm now 2+ years into dating a woman. She's been generous, kind, patient, loving, caring, and understanding. But ROCD and SOCD have really threatened the health and stability of the relationship, as it will. Let's see here, which otherwise is happy, healthy, connected. It feels like the longer the relationship goes on, the more painful the OCD becomes, and the more it seems to ratchet up its attempts to sabotage the relationship. The first year was characterized by relationship-focused obsessions, and the second year was characterized by partner-focused obsessions, which are brutal. I really love my girlfriend, but struggle with relentless questions and critical thoughts. Her sheer presence has sadly become a trigger. As soon as I see her, I usually begin questioning or checking whether I would prefer to be with a man for the rest of my life, or wondering if I didn't give men enough of a shot, or finding myself intolerant of her body and wishing it were thinner, or checking my reaction to her face or body, or coming to the conclusion that I might just not admire her body enough to be in a relationship with her. We have a very physically affectionate and sexually connected relationship. It makes me very sad to not aesthetically appreciate her body in the way I think you're supposed to in a long-term relationship. And it robs her of the experience of having a partner who idealizes her. I feel she deserves to be with someone who doesn't have these reactions to who she is. I know I'm putting too much emphasis on her physical appearance, missing the forest for the trees, but I can't seem to stop. I've learned not to share all these thoughts, but I still suffer with them on my own." And then she ends with, "Any guidance or hard truths are welcome." All right. Broken Record, thank you so much for this question. It's a great question. It's such a hard question. It's such a hard question for folks with OCD because it feels like it's almost like it feels like sometimes when you talk with folks about relationship OCD, or you hear podcasts about it, or you hear people talk about it, it feels like you're not allowed to have opinions or disappointments. Without it being rolled into the ROCD, like, oh, you don't ruminate on that difference, right? Don't aware of it, or don't be aware of it. Don't give it attention. Don't focus on it. And it's almost, it can feel like, and I also recognize that perhaps I, on this podcast, I hope it hasn't been the case, have made it seem like we're not allowed to have these differences, or be aware of them. So I recognize the difficulty in asking this question. And so kind of that twist, or that sense that, the red herring, I think it might be, is within this question, it can feel like it's this added complication because of bisexuality. This idea that like, well, it adds to the complication of it because, oh, well, should I be with this person or should I be with that person? And maybe no one is thinking that. Maybe it's just me, but I'll just say I'm not going to treat this as a complication. We're essentially going to treat it as just simply a difference in body shape, body type, body size, body appearance, whatever you want to say, in a person, right? You've acknowledged that you're attracted to both, and your OCD is grabbing onto that and making a mountain out of a molehill. But we'll discuss more about that. I mean, it's kind of like we've talked about before, like the old classic for this podcast at least, is should I be attracted? My girlfriend has curly hair, but I want straight hair. Or they have straight hair, and then I wish she had curly hair. I always imagined that I'd be with someone like that. I mean, whether it is someone who is curvier and a woman or a male and thin, it ultimately doesn't matter. It is differences and OCD grabbing onto it. All right. But because that's ultimately what I'm hearing, right? Your partner looks one way, but your quote ideal partner looks another way. And OCD grabs onto that, and makes you question whether or not you should be with your partner or with a man. And I love that added element. And I do think that's actually important, where like part of that rumination isn't just, well, I am also attracted to this body shape, or I'm more attracted to this body shape. It's, oh man, did I give, this entire gender, or this entire group of people a fair shot, right? And I'm sure that's feeding back into the, get back out there, break up with your current partner, and go find that fantasy, that perfect person, that right person, right? So that's, just another way it's trying to pull you back in. So I want to start this by just acknowledging people with OCD and people with ROCD are allowed to have personal preferences in their partner's body, in their partner's character, in their partner's personality. Fill in the blank. We're allowed to have these things, right? We're allowed to have our preferences, but if those preferences or those desires become the thing, then it kind of derails the relationship, and it starts to set us back, or it starts to serve as a distraction and an obstacle in the way from the relationship itself and what you're wanting to get out of it. So I did have a question about this, though. Were you aware that you had this interest in kind of this male body type prior to OCD grabbing onto it, making it a big deal? So this has kind of been this long-standing thing that you've kind of noticed, well, I'm generally speaking more attracted to this one side, historically speaking, and OCD has now just taken that and like supercharged this whole big giant thing. Or is it that you didn't really have much of a type in that, but OCD is kind of grabbing onto these, somewhat arbitrary characteristics and is now making it a thing? So some of that would make a difference in the way that we talk about it. Some of that might be important if it comes to how we approach it, how we were to challenge that. It's tough to say exactly where that would go. If you were in the office, we might be having those conversations. We would be having those conversations to just see like how we can challenge this thought. I'm going to approach this as if, or kind of make the assumption that there is some preference towards different body shapes, and that OCD is magnifying it. So that's generally speaking going to be the approach that I'm going to take. I'd have to think through this further to see if there would be a significant difference in the way that I'd approach it in terms of like either the advice or the guidance that I give, or maybe exposures that I would assign. I mean, to cut to the chase, as you all know, exposures are really going to depend on what the feared story is, right? That's really going to guide things and what the compulsions tend to be. But I'm going to approach it in this way. So going back to those preferences, right? So again, everyone's allowed to have opinions and preferences, and the reality is no partner that you're ever going to be with, male, female, raccoon, alien, anybody, is going to meet all of your physical and emotional and personality and spiritual and economic, whatever. And no, they're not going to fit your needs perfectly. And this is going to be a frustrating reality for everybody. So if we're talking about just acceptance, there ain't going to be a perfect person out there. And that includes for you. That includes for me. There is no perfect person. I'll give you more of an example of that later. But so because we need to start with that reality that there is no perfect person, or as the one out there, we need to acknowledge that there is going to be a little bit that we're going to have to get used to, right? That we're going to have to settle for in this relationship. And that's not to say it's a bad thing, or to say that because we're having to settle on certain aspects, not all aspects, not on central make or break, deal breaker types of things, but on some aspects we are going to have to say this person isn't perfect here. This person doesn't match my fantasy. This person doesn't match my my kind of erotic fantasy for what somebody might be, or my personal emotional things perfectly, or needs perfectly. So I'm going to have to weigh the pros and cons with this person, and I'm going to have to accept that maybe with this person I'm not going to get everything. And I can still pursue this person and make it the best possible relationship that I can, one way or the other. And that's everybody across the board. Now, when ROCD jumps in, it's going to hyper-focus then and make those differences everything. It's going to make it life or death. It's going to make the mountain out of a molehill, right? So those differences and the idea of trying to find the perfect person becomes the most important thing. And then all the compulsions that you're doing is to try to eliminate that sense of disappointment, or to kind of bridge that gap between your preferences and the reality, or your quote ideal and the reality of the person that you're with. And those compulsions will never bridge that gap, because it never can. Because this person looks the way that they are. This person is the way that they are. They smell the way, their hair is the way that they are. You can put a wig on them, but they're still going to be somebody else. The idea is that there's still going to be those differences, right? Okay, so you asked for a hard truth. Okay, so the hard truth, I will say, now there's a clinical way, there's a kind of a nice kind of therapy way to say it, and then there's going to be the way that I'm going to say it right now, and then I'll kind of explain what the clinical way is. But the hard truth is this: with the differences that you notice with your current partner, you need to keep those to your damned self. And that may sound rude, but you know what? Every partner is going to find something within their partner, something that's weird, something they don't like, something that isn't ideal or fantasy or whatever. And their job is to keep it to their damn self. Now, the clinical way of saying it is this: acknowledge that there's a difference in the expressed desire for something different. Accept the imperfection and all that comes with it. Resisting compulsively attending to those differences, and refocus instead on the parts of the relationship that you love while making it the best that you can. Does that sound, that sounded clinical, I think? Yeah? All right. But yeah, if we're going to, if what am I trying to say? If you're in this relationship and you're constantly in this cycle of rumination and checking and evaluation and critique and confession, then that's what your relationship is about. And it's going to destroy it and dissolve you and the relationship from the inside out, right? Now, perhaps you've already noticed this, but all those differences, and maybe we think about this as a response prevention approach. Keep all those thoughts to your damn self. All right. As always, the first thing we need to do after we recognize that this thing is happening and we recognize that there is an obsession that is taking over, we need to resist the compulsions that you're doing. Again, the compulsions of trying to maybe satisfy that feeling that you're having, that sense of fear, that sense of dread that maybe the relationship is doomed, that maybe you're ruining them, they're ruining you, all those things, or that just you're never fully going to be happy. Maybe there's something that you didn't fully explore, so there's just something unanswered and you're going to waste your life away. Now, I'm pointing out all these as like these feared stories, and all of that helps guide your compulsions, certainly, but helps guide what the exposures are going to be, right? But some of the compulsions that I was hearing. So one, we need to resist confession. You already acknowledged that, but you need to resist confession. I'll say this: nobody wants to hear it. Nobody wants to hear it. It's not good for you. It's not good for them. It's not good for anybody to be sharing with them these disappointments. Hey, I wish you didn't look this way. Or, oh man, I keep thinking about how unattractive you are sometimes. It's not going to help anybody ever. The phrase is, she deserves, and quote, appreciate her in the way you're supposed to, or the way I'm supposed to. I forget the way you said it. I think this is a variation on scenario twisting. Scenario twisting is that compulsion where you're kind of taking a situation and you're changing certain aspects and then seeing how you feel about it. And it's compulsive in a way that you are engaging this fantasy. Remember, little f fantasy. The little f fantasy is anything other than reality, right? The reality is your partner looks like this and you have these thoughts, etc. The scenario twisting says, all right, now if she looked this way, how would I feel? Oh, I'd feel so much better. Oh, okay. And they would match everything about her, and then I'd be happy and everything would be good. Oh, and the anxiety's gone, right? Or it's going to be, all right, I'm going to envision that they were in a situation where they were in a relationship with someone who truly loved them and appreciated them for all the bells and whistles that they are, and wouldn't they be happy? And it kind of takes you off the hook, right? It's also a sense of this kind of reassurance through justice fantasy. Now, I wrote that in my notes. I wrote self-reassurance through justice fantasy and realized that's probably the most psychodynamic thing that I've ever written in my life. And there we are. It's out there. I guess it's turning. It's coming for me. The psychodynamic, it's coming for me. But you know what? To that end, maybe you are ruining her life. And maybe she's ruining yours. But the scenario twisting ain't going to fix that. It's either break up with them and just keep trying to find the right person, or accept that she ain't perfect and you ain't perfect either. But you get to choose, right? These are options that you get to choose, right? But that's the compulsion isn't going to fix it. The other one I heard is rumination, right? And combined that with the distortion of just the hyper focus on the relationship and on her and on those characteristics, those body shapes. Maybe it's rumination about that life that you were supposed to have, or ruminating about like just trying to like relitigate the relationship over and over again. Comparison certainly is involved with this. Right? How do I feel? Like this kind of emotional, maybe emotional evaluation, right? How do I feel when I look at her? How do I feel when I look at him? How do I feel when I look at another woman with a different body shape? Okay, how do I feel about a man who has like that body shape? Blah. All right, well, I feel better about my partner because I don't feel as bad as I feel about that person. All of it is just seeking this reassurance in this sense that I can be okay. And it's this artificial scratching this like emotional itch that doesn't change anything, right? It doesn't change anything. It's the term that I've said before. It's emotional masturbation. It doesn't do, and it only does something for you. It doesn't do anything for anybody else. It doesn't make anybody else feel better. It just makes you feel good, and for a short bit, because then reality is going to set back in. All right. So I feel you in the sense that, people are different, relationships are different, expectations and reality is going to be different. I talked to the missus about this so I can share this example, but let's be honest, I've shared this example before without asking her. So here we go again. So my wife is basically as tall as I am. She is like an inch to a half an inch shorter than I am, right? I'll put this way. When we first met, like my masculinity required me to be taller than her because, patriarchy or something, or just whatever it is. But that was like one of the first things that I checked. And also, she was probably into this as well, because here's the thing. As we got to know each other and her personality was awesome and we got along really well and she had a good sense of humor, like all these wonderful things about her that attracted me to her, as well as, I could go on and on. But we both shared that we had a fantasy about meeting someone who looked different, right? I had a fantasy of meeting someone who was probably a little bit shorter than she. To be honest, probably blonde. My wife is brunette, and she envisioned that she was going to marry someone who was like much taller than her. And she said tall, dark, and handsome. So like brown eyes, dark hair. I do not. And like we both had this fantasy that we were going to be of different heights. Now, in order for our relationship to be maintained, we have to come to this certain acceptance that we don't have that within the relationship. And we're not gonna have that. Like, I can't get taller. She ain't getting shorter. I guess we're all getting shorter now that we're getting older, but I certainly am not getting any taller. But it's that we have this difference. And we have to kind of mourn the loss of the relationship that we thought we were going to have, maybe the relationship we thought we were entitled to. We have to let it go. Now, letting it go isn't this magical thing that we do and we say, and the clouds open up and doves come down and it takes this thing away from me. It's, or from her for that matter. We don't dwell on it. We still acknowledge. In the conversation that we had, she goes, like, we will sometimes joke, it's like, wouldn't it be nicer if I was taller? Wouldn't it be nicer if you were shorter? Like, sure. Now, that can certainly be compulsive. I think we use it in a joking sort of way, but because I think we've come to grips with like the relationship as it is. But there is this acknowledgement that like this is the way we look. Now, it would be devastating to me if she talked to me and said, like every day, you know what, man, I wish you were taller. In a way that says, I'm disappointed with the way that you look, or I'm unhappy with the way that you look, or I'm not attracted to you in the way that you look, or you would be a better partner if you changed the way you looked. Boy, and you know what? How awful would it be for me to constantly focus on her looks and her height and her shape and her fill in the blank, right? And that would sidetrack me from the relationship that we do have. So it is devastating on both ends to hear and see this. And that's where it goes back to that approach of we keep it to our damned self. Because one of the ways that we build into this relationship, and one of the ways that my wife have worked into building our relationship, is we're going to focus on the relationship that we have and try to make it the best we possibly can, right? And so for you, I would encourage you to consider, can you have a good enough relationship? Not one that's perfect, but one that works. Because you said all these wonderful things about your current partner, about how wonderful they are and how encouraging and supportive and sexual and affectionate and all this great stuff about it. But there are these couple of things that just kind of get stuck in your craw. What would it feel like for you to accept an imperfect relationship? Now, when I asked that question, I also want you to notice, what resistance did you have when I asked that question? What'd you notice? Did you kind of clam up? Did you get tight? Did you feel that stomach drop? Did your shoulders tighten up? Did your heart start skip a beat or something? This idea is what are the obstacles in the way of accepting that you have a imperfect relationship? And why is it so bad that you have an imperfect relationship and that's not going to be perfect, right? I think what that does is it reflects the rules, that feeling reflects the rules about relationships that you have that OCD uses to disqualify the relationship that you're in, right? So it says, here are all the things that maybe it's implicit, but that clamminess or that skip in your heart or whatever it might be, unless it's kind of a heart problem, you should have that checked out. But it's reflecting oh, they're supposed to be this way. Or, relationships, you're supposed, kind of you said, let's see if I can even find that quote. This idea of, oh my gosh, this is such a waste of time then. That I'll just paraphrase that. I can't find it now really quickly. But this idea that she's supposed to be, in a relationship, you're supposed to idealize one another. You're supposed to, you're supposed to have the perfect partner and you're supposed to love everything about them. And if there's any twinge of that's not perfect love or not perfect appreciation, that it's somehow less than, or it's disqualifying, and that, the right ones out there, you just have to go get them. Maybe it's this idea that, you're not supposed to be disappointed. You're not supposed to be upset. You're not supposed to, or this one I hear a lot. What if that in a relationship, in the right relationship, you're never supposed to find someone else attractive who ain't your partner? I'm going to be the ghost of relationship future and say that ain't the fact. And every person I have talked to, every honest person I've talked to, who isn't noticeably, ragingly upset with this question, will acknowledge, yeah, we do still have that part of our brain that goes, that person over there is attractive. That person over there is super duper attractive. That person is just hot and sexy. We notice these things because our brain doesn't shut off. That part of our brain doesn't shut off. The question is, what do we do with that? And that is the big question for folks who have relationship OCD, OCD in general, or nothing, is how do we sit with this reality that this person isn't perfect, but continue to make the best relationship that you possibly can? Now, when it comes to exposure and response prevention, there are certainly some things that you can do to help tolerate this. Now, I'll give you this. The goal of the work with this is not to convince yourself that they're great, is not to convince yourself that you don't notice another partner, or to convince yourself that you like the quote flaws. I'm going to say flaws because some people use that term, whatever, like that we like those. We're not. We can still not love the reality of something about them, but we also acknowledge that they're more than that. There's so much more than that. The goal of exposure and response prevention is to learn to sit with the fear of not being satisfied forever, of being disappointed forever, the fear that maybe you're ruining your life, and boy, you're ruining their life by depriving them of that fantasy person who's going to love them and for everything that they are. Oh, what is the phrase? If you can't love me at my worst, you don't deserve me at my best. What a ridiculous phrase, right? I, at my worst, am a schmuck and a jerk, and I am unlovable, I would say. Maybe my wife would be kinder than I am, but it's like I'm annoying, and no one wants to be around me when I'm at my worst. You don't have to love those things, but we do acknowledge and take this person as a whole person. I do that with her, she does that with me, and we're doing that for the partners that we're with, and we're letting go of the compulsive efforts. All right, so a couple of things you can do. Of course, I'm going to recommend scripting as something like this. And the stories that you can write for this is, again, writing the story that you are disappointed forever. What feelings would arise? What situations would you come across? What would you think? What would your partner notice and say that would raise that feeling of discomfort? Because remember, we're not trying to convince yourself that you are going to be disappointed or that you're not. We're saying, boy, this thought is really getting in the way of my relationship. So I need to learn that thing is tolerable. I need to learn to sit with it and to not be as reactive to it. So that's why we're doing it. So we're doing the hard thing. Remember the idea of like lifting weights, right? I don't care what kind of weights you lift. In order to build muscle and to get stronger, we need to lift heavy things that needs to be a strain on our body. Not to the point that it breaks us, but just to be a little harder than what we currently can do, where it's a little hard, but we keep doing it and we get stronger, and then we do something harder and heavier, and sooner or later we can handle whatever comes our way, right? So that's kind of the idea. So maybe it's the story about being disappointed forever. Maybe it's going to be a story about actually finding that true love, and that maybe you're stuck with this like gargoyle over here, or that you find this true love and you have to upend your whole life, and how embarrassing that would be, and how hard that would be, and how hurt your partner would be, and their entire family and your friend group and all this stuff. If any of that was activating to you, write it out, reread that script, and not because you're supposed to torture yourself or just to wallow, but it's to say, boy, this story feels uncomfortable, but I can handle that. I'm strong enough. I'm caring enough to do this, to have this feeling, and to say this is going to be here, and that this feeling is okay, because this feeling is not a fact. It's a feeling related to, boy, a really unwanted outcome. Boy, wouldn't it suck as if you did live your entire life disappointed? Yeah, that would suck. Wouldn't it be terrible if you did completely upend your entire life for someone that you met in the future? Yeah, there's a lot of awkward and a lot of difficulty that would come from that. But it doesn't mean it's happening. It's saying this is a thought that's in my mind, and me engaging with that thought is distracting me from the wonderful person that's in front of me, the wonderful person that I'm trying to build this relationship with, this life with. Now, I'll say this: it doesn't mean you have to stay with them forever. You're allowed to break up with people, but break up with people because you want to break up with them, not because you're trying to seek out the perfect person, but because you go, it's not working out. Now that is a whole other sermon, and we can talk about that another time. All right, so back to ERP. I think a good exposure for relationship OCDs is giving compliments to your partner, is affection, is touch, is being there for them, doing things for them, supporting them when it feels hard, when you feel uncomfortable. So it's leaning in when anxiety wants you to lean away, right? What I'll ask you to do is think about all the things in your life that you're avoiding, right? All the things that you want to say, all the things that you want to go do those things, right? I know that's kind of a big blanket statement about exposures, but think about other things and things that you're not doing. Well, plan on going to do those things. The other thing is that those non-engagement responses, the one that I wrote down here, which is not a typical non-engagement response, but it's acknowledging the thought and saying, I ain't doing nothing about this. This thought is useless. The typical non-engagement responses would be things like boy, that thought really makes me feel uncomfortable. And it does. You can say like, oh man, I really want to ask for reassurance. I really want to confess right now. Yeah, you do. But we acknowledge that we want to do that thing. It's kind of like, hey, at the conference, I snuck away. This is a side note. I snuck away and from the conference for one of the talks, 'cause I couldn't find anything that I was really interested in. And I snuck away to a guitar shop because they had a bunch of banjos there and I wanted to give them a try because in Southern California, it's like you find the cheapest possible banjos and you don't get to try like something really good. So this shop had like 40 of them that were really good. So I had to go check them out. I really wanted to buy them. I wanted to buy several of them. Did I do that? No, for a whole host of reasons. But I acknowledge that I want to. I'm not going in there going like, nope, I'm fine, don't need one. That's a lie. I do want them, but I chose not to, again, for a lot of reasons. But the non-engagement responses honors that feeling. All right, I feel like I want to confess. Yeah, you do, but doesn't mean I'm gonna. You can also say, like, again, we've talked about this. How terrible would it be if that story were to happen? Yeah, it would be terrible. What I wrote down here was meet moop. The meet moop is it's a non-engagement response that just kind of acknowledges like a heavy feeling, an uncomfortable feeling, an unsettled feeling. And that's kind of what it does, right? It's kind of a, cool story, bro statement, right? Well, meet moop. And again, it can feel very disregarding, and it kind of is, and it can feel like marginalizing, I suppose it is. But that's kind of what we're trying to do with this narrative that you have said is a problem. So, all right, I have yammered on quite a bit. I'm sure I could talk about compassion and more about acceptance and other exercises you can do, but hopefully this has given you some way to think about it. And Broken Record, I really appreciate this question. I appreciate you letting me be a part of your story, letting me be a part of your recovery story, and hopefully there was something in here that challenges you and helps push you through to that next stage. So everybody out there, thank you so much for letting me be a part of your recovery journey. Again, I never take this lightly, and I try to take it as seriously as I can while trying to make it at least a little silly and a little goofy, because I think deep down with these, what I call, when I get my thoughts as my crazy man thoughts, I call them that. But it's to these thoughts that we, part of us knows that this is ridiculous or that is irrational. but they're there. But I appreciate all of you out there for letting me be a part of your story. So again, thank you so much. Until next time, everybody, take a risk, challenge yourself, and don't take your brain too seriously. Bye. Thank you for listening to the Fearcast. If you would like your question answered on a future episode, please click on the Submit a Question link at fearcastpodcast.com. If you would like your question answered sooner, please send me a recording of your question to questions@fearcastpodcast.com or by sending me an audio message through Instagram by DMing me at fearcastpodcast on Instagram. If you like the Fearcast, please write a review on your podcast platform of choice. Please remember that the Fearcast is not a substitute for psychotherapy. If you need a little bit of help in your recovery, please go over to fearcastpodcast.com and click on the Find Help link, and there's going to be some information for you there. So until next time, take a risk, challenge yourself, and don't take your brain too seriously. Bye.